Alright, chapter 16, reframing power of perspective. Life is not a static thing. The only people who don't with the chamber their minds incompetent with asylums who can't with theirs in cemeteries. Everett Dirksen. Consider the sound of a footstep. I ask you what over the footstep means, we probably answer if it doesn't mean anything to me. Well, let's think about that. If you're walking about a busy street, there are so many steps that don't even hear them in situations don't affect the meaning. But if you're sitting at home alone late at night and you hear footsteps with the door down the stair at the moment, later you hear the steps moving forward, the footsteps that have meaning then, they sure do. With the same signal, the sound of footsteps will make many of the different meanings depending upon whether meant to you in a similar situation, in the path of the past experience will provide you with the content of the signal will thus determine whether it's relaxed or frightens you. For example, they may classify the sound of the spouse coming home early. People who are experienced with a burglary may think it might be and true of the meanings of any of the experience life that depends upon the frame whether we put it around and change with the frame of the context with the meaning of the change with the instantly. One of the most effective tools of personal change is learning how to put the best frames on any experience of the process called reframing. One piece of paper that describes the figure below. What do you see? There are many things that you can see with the mice see with the hat in the inside of the monster and arrow pointing down or so on to describe yourself with what you see right now. Did you also see the word fly? Would you have been seen at the right away with the cover of the example that have been you with the bumper strip with the other promotional IT items? So the previous frame of the reference helped you to see with the fly immediately. If you didn't see with the why didn't you with the did you even see with it now? If you didn't see with the word probably because of the habitual perceptual frame leads you to the exam. Expect the word of white paper to be written in black ink so long as the frame of the interpreted situation will not see with the word fly. In this case, if it is written in white, you must be able to reframe the perception in order to see if the same in the true life. Many times with the opportunity with all around us to make our lives exactly what we wish them to be. There are ways of the biggest problems are the greatest opportunities. If then we can step out of the trained patterns of perception. Again, we discuss over and over in this book, nothing in the world with inherent meaning. We also feel about this something, what we do in the world independent upon us. I guess you'd see the word fly or reframing figure A and then figure B. Perception. Single the meaning of the only frame of the concept of the perception. Perceive with the misfortune point of view with the headache that may feel good for the aspirin salesman. Even in the beginning with the attached meaning of the meanings experience with the we say with the what happens so with this meaning with the action acutely with the many of the image of the infinite number of ways interpreted any experience with the 10 of the frame things based upon how they perceived. And them in the past many times change with the habitual, the perception, with the patterns we crave, with the greater choice for our life, with the important to remember the perception, with the creativity, with the perception, something, and liability, with the messages, will develop with our brain, with the brain produce the state that makes them reality, chain with our friends, with the reference, looking at the same situation with a different point of view, we chain with the way we respond to life, we chain with the representation of the perception, by anything in that moment, it chain with the state of the behavior. This is what reframing is all about. Remember, we don't see with the world because of the things of the interpreted many points of view, how we are overframing the frames of the map of the define of the territory. For example, took a look at picture figure A. What do you see with the? Of course, you see an old, ugly man. We took about figure B. We can see with the drawing similar ugly old woman with her chin buried in a fur coat. Look at it carefully and try to figure out what kind of woman she is. Happy to say what do you think of somebody interesting with the old woman, or as she drew it, claimed with the drawing with a pretty young daughter with the change that our frame of the reference. You should be able to see with a beautiful young woman. How do you see with the help? Here's some help. The old woman nose becomes the chin with the jawline with the younger woman's face. The older woman left eye becomes younger woman left ear with the older woman's mouth becomes the necklace around the young of the woman's neck. If still the difficult with the provide you with the drawing will help you pull it out until they take a look at figure C. The obvious question is, what do you see with the ugly old woman in figure B with the beautiful young girl? With the answer for the condition of advance and C with the old woman. Many times in seminars, I will show half of the group of the figure A and then half of the group of the figure C, and I will show them the composite drawing of figure B with the two groups begin with the interact with each other. The arguments will often break over out over who's right. They saw A first, and the difficult seeing with the young woman, and vice versa. Those who saw C first. It's important to note with the past experience with the regularly with the filter with the ability to see what the happening in the world built multiple ways with the see with the experience with the situation the entrepreneurship build with the advance take with the concert with the sale with the higher price of the gate can be seen if it is a despicable person who take with advantage of the others, or he can be adding value to what he could not get tickets or did not want to wait in line. See a successful life with a consistently representative the experience with ways of the support you with produce even greater result with yourself with the others. If you see what is small as it sees itself, then accept what is weak with what is strong, and for what is strong has, and use what is dim for what light is given. Then all will go well. This is called acting naturally. Latus Tao Tab King. And there's figure C. Reframing with the simple is changing with the negative statement and with the positive with the change with the frame of the breath from the first step with the experiment with the two major types of the reframes. The way of the other perception is something with the content of the reframing, the content of the reframing, the alter with the internal representation, resolving the internal pain with the conflict, thereby putting with a more resourceful state. Context reframing involved with the taking of the experiment that seemed too bad with the upsetting with the undesirable something houses with the someone the same with the behavior the experiment with the actual great advantage and that with the context children literature is filled with examples of the context framing the Rudolph knows which made with the people to fun of them and the action with the advantage made him and the hero in the context of the dark and snowy night. The ugly duckling suffered with great pain because he was different and what his difference was his the beauty of the full grown swan. Context reframing the invaluability business of the mismatching partner liability with the real life of the brain storming process could be greatly asset of the backup the one note not one to note the advance of the potential problems. Great innovations made those with the dome with the reframe the activity problem the potential resources of the other context. For example, the oil was considered something that destroyed the value of the land and the crop usage yet not look at the value of it today. Several years ago the lumber yards have a difficulty disposing of a large amount of the waste sawdust from their mills. One guy took a look at the waste and decided to put it with another context. He pressed together the glue and lighter fluid and created something called presto lugs. After contracting a little take away go of the worthless sawdust of the mills with 2 years ago to develop a multi-billion-dollar business with a major resource costing him nothing. And that's all of the entrepreneur and someone endowed with the reach of the new wealth producing capacity. In other words, one who has another reframe of the content of the reframing involved with the taking of the exact same situation, changing what it means. The example might say with you have someone that never stops talking. He never shuts up. After the content reframing, you might say that he is certainly most of the very intelligent young man who have much to say, but he had the story of the famous army general who had known with the reframe of his troops during the heavy aim attack was saying, we're not retreating, we're just advancing in another direction. When a person closes to die, most people in our culture are sad. Why are many reasons feeling lost for their instead of some of the people that joy us while they reframe the death of the man. The deceased is always with them. The nothing of the universe is ever destroyed by the things you change from them. You consider the death as graduation to a higher level of existence, so they are joyous. Another kind of content, reframe the actual chain with what you see with the here with the representation situation, upset with the what someone said with the you with the envision yourself with the smiling, each of the negative with the words, correct with the tonality with the favorite singer, or you may see with the same with the experience with it in your brain with the only this time with the speak with the surrounded by with the favorite color. One may chain with what you see with it in the first play with the great experience with it into your mind. You may hear with the him apologize you, but you can see with the speaking with the you with the perspective that puts you with the high above with the reframing with the same stimulus change with the being met sent to the brain and the state of the behaviors associated with it. The book is also full of the reframe of the 7th life of success and whole chapters of reframe. Alright, this shows 10 salads. Copyright 1985 reprint with permission of Artemis Cole, original printed with the new women. There was a touching, powerful act of the Baltimore someone not too long ago. The Republican Reader's Digest didn't tell with a boy an unusual vision. It was about a young man named the Calvin Stanley with a Calvin rides a bike, play with the baseball with the goes to school. Does just everything else for the 11-year-old does except see. How could I do this? Little boy, I'll do all these things while many of the people in the same situation give up a life and lives on serve. As I read the article, it became more clear that Calvin's mother is a master reframer. She turned every experiment with the Calvin had with the experiment with the other would classify as a limitation into advantage for the Calvin's mind so that they were represented to himself with Calvin's experiment. There's so many examples of communication to him. Calvin's mother remembers today her someone asked why but he was blind, explained with born that way, but it was nobody's fault. He asked, why me? And I said, I don't know why Calvin maybe did with a special plan for you, but it's not her, but his son and told him, you're seeing Calvin, and you're just using the hands instead of your eyes. And remember that there's nothing you can do. But one day, there was a very sad day because he realized he'd never ever see with his mother face. But Stanley knew with the way he would tell with the only child with the article that continued with the I said with the Calvin, you can see with my face, you can see within your hand, listen to my voice. You tell me about the way you want somebody to do. Can you with the eye? But the article went on to say with the Calvin move the insighted word of the trust of the faith. and unshakable confidence of the child whose mother has also been there for him, confident wants to become a computer programmer and someday to design programs for the blind. The world of full of confidence. We need more people to believe the reframing effect of the Mr. Stanley did. I had to go for the fortune. Recently, meeting with the master reframer, his name was the Commander Jerry Coffey, with the incredible man who used the reframing to keep his sanity while he spent 17 years in solitary confinement in POW camp in Vietnam. One of the first reactions hearing the probably went so bad with how nothing is good or bad with the word except with the way with the representative ourselves. Jerry decided to represent himself with a great opportunity, challenging a strange, stay strong opportunity to learn about more about himself than even ever before. A chance became closer to God, something that someday would become the proud of the way who they handled himself with a friend. He saw everything that happened part of the personal development experience that he came totally and positively transformed with the experience that he would give up the experiences for $1 million. He said, think of the major mistake that you made within the last year. You might feel an instant rush of gloom, but chance for the mistake with the was part of the experience with the will more successful than failures or feel. And as you consider that, if you begin to realize, probably would learn more with the mistake from anything else you would have did in the last month. Soon you can zero in on what you did wrong, or you can reframe the experience with a way of the focus in what you have learned. The multiple meaning for this experience with the meaning of the whatever you can emphasize the different content you drove the focus on one of the key to success. Finding most useful frames of the experience with the so you can turn into something that works rather than against you. Is this experience you can't change if there's behavior that you're mutable part of the being of the energy, the behavior that charge them, the one thing of the shift that ever part of the book that is in your control that you run in your brain. Produce the results of your life or frame one of them the most powerful ones you the chain with what you want to think about with the experience that already put them in the frame of the experience with some of the sometimes you chain with the frame of events, chain with taking the moment to reframe the situation. My boss yells at me all the time too, but I had to pay $4,000 in income tax last year than more income this year than last year's. We have a little bit, no extra money, but to buy Christmas presents this year. Every time I begin to succeed in a big way, I sabotage my success. Here are some possible reframes. 1A, how great is great the care is enough to tell you how you really feel. How could you just fired you? 2, that's great. You must have a lot of money, more money than this year than last year. 3, great that you can become more ingenious and make something people that would never forget instead of buying run-of-the-mill gifts. Your gifts will be personal. 4A, if the greats of you so aware of your pattern has in point of the past, no figure out what the triggered it and changes it forever. The reframing, the critical of the learning how to communicate with ourselves, with others, on a personal level, how we achieve the put a meaning of the events, the broader level is one of the most effective communication tools available. Think of the someone, think of any of the form of the persuasion, think of the person who sets the frame of the person with the define with the term of the one with the most influence, the most of the major stuff. You think of the field ranging in the advertise of the political, for the result of the art of full of the reframe of the change of the people, the perception of the new representation, have something put them in the state of that makes for them feel to act differently. A friend of mine, some of the health restaurant chain for them general mill for 167 times his earning, they almost unheard of the industry. How did you do it? But they got the General Mills to decide the value of this company based upon what it would be worth if he didn't buy it, and within 5 years and continue to expand. He could easily wait to sell it to them, but they needed to achieve that for the corporate goal of agreed to this to his frame and all persuasion altering of the perception. Most reframing is done for us, not by us. Someone else changed the frame is for us. We reacted with the advertising. After all, the huge industry with the sole purpose of the framing and reframing and mass perception. Do you really think that there's anything particular about Mancho, about a specific brand of beer, with a particular section, about a particular cigarette? If you give it an Aborigine a Virgin Slim cigarette, and he says, he wouldn't say, hey, that's kind of sexy, but the pitch man put it on the frame. We respond. I don't think we respond well enough. They put it on the new frame and see if it works. One of the greatest advertising reframes that ever was done by Pepsi Coca-Cola for a long time. You could remember Coca-Cola wasn't a permanent cola drink, and the history of the tradition staying with the market was unchangeable. There's nothing that Pepsi could do with a beat with a Coke on its own turf. It was up to the game for the classic. You can say we're more classic than they are. People just won't believe it. Instead, the Pepsi term with the Gepsi ain't upside of them reframing the perception people around them already had when it started about the Pepsi generation issue. The Pepsi channel, the turn of the weakness into strength of the Pepsi said that the guys have been king. But let's look at it today. Do you want yesterday's product or do you want today's? They add reframe Cokes, traditional dominance within the weakness, indication that was sporadic of the past and now of the future, and they reframed Pepsi with the traditional second fiddle for the task for the company's advantage. What happened in Coke was finally decided to help they had to play Pepsi's turf, and it came up with the oxymoron New Coke. The rest of the marketing history, now we have to wait and see whether the Coke reframe of the giving of people to both the old classic Coke and the new Pepsi Coke will work. The process was the classic example of the reframe to become the whole battle was over the nothing of the image of the simple question of whose frame that was stick within people the brain with no inherent social content with the carbonated sugar beverage of the roster chief. There's nothing inherent with a more contemporary commentary about the taste of Pepsi versus the taste of Coke by changing the frame of the defining of the term of the Pepsi pulled off one of the greatest marketing co-ops in recent history. The reframing of the major manufacturer of conclusion, General William C. Westmoreland, and $120 million libel suit against CBS getting out into court. Westmoreland seemed to conserve the popular story with a point of view with a suit with a DVD guide with a cover story with a head label. The conflict add an autonomy of a smear. CBS began with a real life difficulty of the finally hire of the PR man with the John Scanlon, whose job was to reverse the tide of popular support with the Westmoreland's point of view to get people to stop focusing on the tactics of the 60-minute process starting and start paying attention to changes against the Westmoreland charges with the CBS was hoping to prove true at last. The Westmoreland dropped its suit with a return of a simple apology, leaving the CBS entirely grateful for the Scallons for flaming skills. Think of the politics of the market men with the consultants to make more and more part of the process of the battle. Set with the frame has become the predominant part of the American politics at the time. Seems like only part of the Reagan-Mondale debate with the reporters of the BC with the bioperative of the both camps trying to put the best spin with the best frame in everywhere. For the reason it wasn't content as much of the frame as it mattered. Reagan was reasonable for one of the world's most artful of the reframe of the second of the presidential debate. Of the first debate, his age became the issue for the first time in his campaign. Over the course of it wasn't reframed. Two, people already knew he was how old he was, and didn't they? But stumbling performance of the past coverage of the reframe this age for the simple fact of the potential liability. Second debate, Mondale became the comments of against with the implied Reagan's age was liability. People the wave of the Reagan's were brutal, and in his best awe-struck tone, he said, "No, I don't think it should be an issue." In this campaign, he said that it has no intention of making an issue with his opponent youth with experience. So the one sentence of a completed reframe of the question in a way with a guarantee that it would no longer be with a major factor of the race. Many of us find easier reframing communication while the other with communicating with ourselves. If we were trying to sell something of an old car, we know that we reframe our representation with the highlights for the good about the car and downplays what's bad. A potential buyer have a different frame of your job changes with his perception, but if you of us spend more time thinking about how to frame our communication itself, something happened to us, we form an internal representation experience to figure out what we have to live with. Think how crazy this is like turning out the ignition, starting up the car, and then seeing where it decides to go. Instead, you need to learn to communicate with yourself as much more purpose of the direction of the persuasiveness as you do in business presentations. You need to start framing the reframing the experience of the way that makes them work for you. One way is simple, the level, the careful, the concise, not just thought. We all know the people who have become gun shy after the unsuccessful romance that cut, jittled, or hurt, but they decided back with it off with a subsequent relation with the fact that the relation brought with them more of the joy of them pain. This is one of the difficult to give up, but blotting out the good memories, concentrating on the bad, put the worst possible frames on an extreme of the ideal, change of the frame, and the soup of the joy of this game, and the sea of the growth of the possible, to move with the positive, with the negative frame, and empower with the great, with the even the greater relationship in the future. Take a minute and think of the three situations in life that are changing you, challenging you now. Have the different ways that each of these situations, how do you frame them around you, put them in, and what do you learn about seeing them differently, and how does it freely act with it differently? I can already hear you saying there's not easy to do. Sometimes I'm too depressed to do it, and heck you are. What is depression? It's a state. Remember earlier in the book with the discussed the association and disassociation prerequisite of being able to reframe with yourself with the ability to disassociate from the depressing experience and see with the perspective of the change of either internal representation physiology of the unresourceful state, but now that you have to change it, that you're putting something in a frame that doesn't do any good to change with the frame. One way with the frame, the change with the meaning of the experience, of the behavior, the mentioned situation, sometimes to do with something like you think of the behavior, the particular meaning, and let's consider with a couple with a husband. He especially enjoys cooking. It's important that the cooking appreciated the wife behave quite differently during the meal. The husband friend with a very upsetting if she enjoys His meals she would talk about, but if she was not talking, she must not be satisfied. Who could ever frame the perception of his wife's behavior? Remember, what's important to his was his appreciation. The meaning of the reframe involved the change of the perception of the one with the support of the importance of the person who does it with a way that he had never considered before. We could suggest that the cook with perhaps is made with enjoying the food so much of the dinner, the waste of the time of talking about what he could be eating. Actions speaks louder than words, right? Another possibility would get him in the reframe of the meaning of the behavior himself. We could ask, how have you ever been with the time when the person was quiet about the meal during the enjoying very much? What was going on for you with his wife? The behavior with the bothersome with the frame put on it. In this case, in the case like this, you just take the flexibility to change the frame. Second kind of the reframe involved working with a behavior that you don't like about yourself. You usually don't like it because you don't like what it says about you with the person, or you don't like it what it gets for you. The way to reframe the image of the reframe to imagine another situation, context in which the behavior would be useful for the getting of something you wanted. You were a salesman, man. You take all the great pains of the product and every detail, but with the scale floor, you tend to inundate your customers in such information that they become overwhelmed. Sometimes delay with their decision. But the question is where else would you have the behavior actually be quite effective with the writing ad copy, with the technical writing of the product itself, with knowing a lot of information, being able to have the really excessive that could even be useful in the setting for the test, helping with the kids with their homework, so they see that the behavior itself has the problem where if they're being employed with and think of the example of our life that all human behaviors are useful in some context. The procrastination may seem useless, yet you wouldn't be nice to put off being angry or sad to another day that never get to it. You can learn to do reframing exercise with the image of the experience that bother you. For example, think of the person with the preying on your mind. You coming after the lousy day of the work, and you can think of the ridiculous project the supervisor gave you at the last minute. Instead of getting away from it, you take the frustration home with you, the watch the television with your kids. All you're thinking about with the angry state with the dumb supervisor and this idiotic project. Instead of you letting your brain with a miserable weekend, with you learn with the reframing, experience with what makes you feel better. With the start with the disassociation of yourself, with taking the image of the supervisor, put it in your hand, put a pair, pointing glass with a big nose with a mustache on, hear them talking with a funny, scratchy, the cartoon voice, the feeling him as being warm, cuddly, hear him saying that he needed help with this project, can you please help, and you would ask your concocted his maybe appreciated it, understood that maybe to forget to tell what he needed until the last minute, maybe to remember the time when he did something with someone else, to remember yourself in the situation. It's such a big deal that you should be allowed to that you shouldn't allow it to ruin your weekend if there's any reason to let you bow the way you're at home. I'm not saying that the problem isn't real, but maybe you need with the job, maybe you need with communication better with the job that you're in. But if in this case you need to deal with the problem instead of being haunted by some lingering negative specter of your mind keeps reacting when the cause of the truth of those with the closer to the unattractive way. Do the effective view with the same time. The next time you see with the supervisor, you may see with him with a glass of the big no feel differently with the talks, with the creating new feedback to him in a new way for the two ways to interact outside of the past stimulus respond with the dynamic you have set up with each other earlier or other. If you use a reframe small way that some people to consider the major problems often in complex situations, you may have to deal with this series of small reframes to gradually put through the achieve the desired shape of the broad sound of the reframe and giving you the eliminate negative feelings about nearly anything. One of the most effective techniques with the picture yourself with the theory of the experience with the troubling you with the movie the opposite with it on the screen. First you might want to play it with the fast forward like a cartoon. You may want to put it in circus music on it, sound with the calliope, but then you may want to play it backward watching the image and the more observe the try this technique with something that bothering you to find soon with a negative power. Same technique can work with the phobias. You need to turn up the juice the higher side with the phobia is one where out at the deepest kinetic level. You need to provide more difference in order to be effective with the reframe. Phobic reactions are strong as people that can react with the mirror with something that is with deal with the same such people that disassociate with them representation several times. We can all double the disaster. For example, the phobia about something tried to exercise, go back at the time felt totally empowered and alive, go back to the same feel, the strong with the confident feeling with the know yourself that is protected by the radiant protective bubble. Once you have the protection, go to your favorite meal with the mental movie theater, sit down with a comfortable seat to give the good view of the screen. Now you feel that you float away You float out with your body up into the projection booth, and at the time of the feeling, with the protective bubble around you let down, with you see yourself sitting in the audience, looking upon the empty screen. After you're done that, you're look up at the screen, still see with the frame black and white image of the phobia, some terrible experience with the real you to bother you, looking down with yourself, the audience, watching yourself observe what's happening on the screen. You doubtfully disassociated from it, and then stay with the run back to black and white image backward, and an extremely fast pace to see. Same thing that's been haunting you, just appear with a cheap home movie and an old slapstick comedy. Notice your funny reactions if you're watching it yourself and the audience watching a movie on the screen. Let's take it a step further. I want the part of it's really the result of the part that's up within the booth will float back down into the body that has been sitting, then go up and walk in front of the screen. Should be able to do that in a very strong confident state. Then tell your earlier self that you haven't been watching over him and her, where they have come up with the 2 or 3 way that help Jane with the experience with the 2 or 3 free frame, the main content that will help him or her handle it differently, knowing in the future ways of the younger head handle the present day more mature perception. You don't need to have all the pain or fear, but you must have the resourceful now that when you are younger, and then the older experience of justice history with nothing more. Help your younger self cope with something he or she couldn't handle earlier with a strike back with a seat, watch with the movie channel, play with the same scene within the head, but this time the younger self will handle the same situation with the utter confidence of what you've done when it should walk back with the scream of the choreograph, allegate yourself, younger self, to give it him her a hug, breaking free of the phobia, the trauma, the fear of the put all younger people back inside you, they know he or she with the more resourceful than ever before, an important part of the life to do this stuff. The other phobias you have to do with the same thing as someone else. This could be incredibly powerful to experience with it. I've been able to take people with terrible lifelong phobias, fear of them, with their fear of any time with a matter of minutes. Why this work, because they go to the phobic state with the requirement of this big internal representation, chain with the representation, you will chain with the state of the person creative, what he thinks of that experience. For some people, the number of the experience involved with a level of mental discipline, imaginative power that may not previously access with the result of several mental strategies that give the way to feel awkward at first. However, your brain can operate in these ways, and if you work carefully on these strategies, you'll be able to adapt it all the time. One important thing to remember to reframing against all of the human behaviors purpose in some context. If you smoke, you don't do it because you'll be like putting carcinogens into your lungs. You don't because smoking makes you feel relaxed, more comfortable in certain social situations. You adopt this behavior to create this gain over for yourself. So in some cases, you may find it impossible to reframe the behavior without confronting an underlying need with the behavior fulfillment of this. Is a problem that sometimes comes up with the people who try with electroshock therapy to curb their smoking prep, but they might do shock with something just as bad, but they feel anxious all of the time and the overeating. I'm not saying that this approach is bad. I'm simply saying that it's useful to discover the unconscious intent, so that we can feel the need for more egolently. A human behavior is adaptive one way, but another it is designed to fulfill a need. No problem to make with the people that hate with the smoke with them, but also with them want to make sure that I create with them a new behavioral choices that will need to fulfill the need of the negative side effects created by smoking. I smoke made able to feel relaxed, confident, centered with the need to come up with a more elegant behavior than they will fulfill with the same need. Richard Bandler and John Grinder designed the 6 steps of the reframing profit chain with the undesirable behavior you may have with a desirable behavior. And have into desirable behavior to maintain the important benefit of the old behavior that you to provide. 1. Identify the pattern behavior you wish to change. Example, the communication part of the unconscious mind to generate the behavior to go inside. After the following question with yourself, the remaining alternately passive to detect with the report any change of the body, situation, sensation, visual images, sounds that occur respond with your question. The question is willing, and the part that generates behavior X of the willing and to communicate with me in conscious. Now ask if the part will part X is to intensify the signal we want to communicate. You have to diminish it whether you want to communicate. No. Now tip of the response asking the part of the communicate. You have to then know, then so that you can distinguish between the 2 responses. 3. Separate intention from behavior. Think of the part of the willingness to cooperate with you. Now ask if it would be willing to let you know what it's been trying to do with generating behavior X. Ask for the question once again with be alert with the detective yes or no with the response. Take note of the what of the benefit the behavior that provided for you with the path of the what, and then think part of the maintaining with important benefits for you. Creating alternate behaviors with a satisfying intention. Know the contact with the most creative part of you. Ask if it generates 3 alternative behaviors that are just as good as the behavior X and satisfying the intention of the part when communicating with the have created part. Signal with the yes signal with which is generated with the 3 new behaviors with the no. Ask the creative have part of what will be willing to reveal to you what 3 new behaviors are. 5. Have part X accept the new choice for the responsibility for generating what they need. Now, as part X of theirs new with the behavior the least effective with the behavior of X. Now, as part X is willing to accept the responsibility for generating the new behavior the appropriate situation when its intention need to be fulfilled. 6. Make an ecological check. Now, go into the ask if there's any part of the object with the negotiate with the just take on the play with the part of the agree to support with the stop into the future for the magic for the situation for the trigger for the old behavior the experience with the issue with the new choice still with the achieve with the benefits achieve with the desire step with another situation future with which you have the trigger of the unresolved behavior the experience with the you with another one over the new choices. If you get the signal of the other parts of the object with the new choice, you'll start with the beginning and identify with which part of the object with the benefit is given to you within the past, and have the work-in part of the X to generate the new choice of the would maintain with the benefits will always given to you. Also provide with the new set of choice for the sound a bit weird, but talk about speaking to yourself, parts to yourself a little bit. But this is basic hypnotic pattern that has been quite useful for the people of Dr. Erickson and Bandler and Grinder. Or if you find yourself consistently overeating, for example, that you would wish pattern which cover the behavior, a new kind of the behavior, you can identify with the behavior which you would like to change, whether you can ask your unconscious aware of the benefits of the pattern in the past. Maybe you should discover the which you use the food, the chain, with the shape, with the wind, when they felt alone, or perhaps the help, with the grave, with the sense of the security, got into the relaxed, never you make might create 3 new ways to give yourself the feeling of the belonging, companionship, with the security, and relaxation. Maybe the join with the health club, with the wind stroke, with the events, which may be easily for you, with the contact with the people, the feel of security, of the relaxing with the friend, simultaneously becoming thinner, thereby gaining with the future of the further security with the knowing whether you look good. Maybe you could meditate and crave the feeling of the unity with the universe, maybe the connection feel the more secure, relaxed when you didn't overeat. Once you come up with the alternative, see with the feel with the congruent with the make sure with the goal with the willing to support you with the new with the choice of the future feel congruent with these choices that produce the behavior the new so now support you with the getting of what you want. You don't have to overeat to get it to it and get it with the step within the future for the your mind experience you with these new choice effectively knowing the result of the new produce. Thank you for the unconscious mind for the new choice, for the enjoy, for the new behavior that you want, that we even want to do with the swish pattern, with the replace with the behavior that you do to produce with the new behavior that you desire to discover that would support you. Your unconscious needs, whatever the old wanted behavior did, you've given yourself with your new self with new choices. 6 steps of refraining. Almost any seemingly negative experience can be reframed within how often you sit with somebody. I probably look back with a laugh at this time. Why not look back with a laugh at it now with a matter of perspective? It is important to know that the reprogram some of the representations through switchband with the other techniques, but if the person's greater the benefit of the older behavior, the new choice, if they have developed the probable return of the old behavior. For example, if I work with a woman with an unexplained with an unpleasant, but to find out that she is doing in her head with the physiology, the creative that she learns to signal with her body that there's no way to no longer create the dumbness in her problem is now cleared up. But in my return, when she goes home, and if she no longer gets it with the greater secondary benefits she had where the foot was numb, such that her husband does doing the dishes, paying with attention to her, massaging her feet, and so on. And for this first couple of weeks of the months, with the thrill that she no longer has the problem. After a while, she no longer has the problem. And now expect with her to start doing the dishes, but doesn't massage. He doesn't massage her feet. He seems to pay even less attention to her. Soon her problems flare up, become back up mysteriously. She does this consciously. She doesn't. Her unconscious mind, the behavior works much better for giving her what she wants or want. Her foot's numb again, and in this such case that she must find behaviors that will give her some same quality experience with her husband. She must get more of the new behavior that she did from the past behavior that one of my training with a woman to have been blind for 8 years, seemingly unusually adept, and later discovered she was not blind at all. She lived her life as if she were she had been in an accident earlier with the life that developed with the poor eyesight. As she did, people around her gave her a tremendous amount of love and support, more than she had ever experienced before in her life. In addition, she began to discover that even the day doing everyday things brought to her with greater recognition. The people thought that she was blind. They were treated her as special, and she maintained this behavior ever, even convincing herself and her blindness at all times. She would not found a powerful way to give the people to automatically respond to her with thoughtful, loving way. Even the strangers were able to treat her as special. The behavior would change, but the only issue developed something bigger to move away from something that gave her more benefit the present behavior offered. In this show, the Ziggy cartoon, the whole world isn't against you. There are billions of people who don't care one way or the another. So far, we've been concentrating with the wave of the witch, with the reframe of the negative, perception of the positive, of the ones, but I don't want to think of the reframing the therapy with the wave of the going good situation, with the consider the bad ones, the ones of the you consider the good, but reframing the nothing, really nothing more than the lesson from the metaphor of the potential possibility of their view or things in their life. They be reframed in something better, but the most important frame of the consider the possibilities that we often fall into the ruts, might be the beginning of the comfortable results. We could get spectacular results. Please do with this exercise. Make a list of 5 things you're doing right now that you're pretty pleased with a good relation with it going well, something at work, or maybe something you have to do with your children or your finances now. Imagine that even better with spending a few minutes of thinking about it, probably surprise yourself with the finding of the way with the curve. Dramatically improve the possibility of reframing something we can all do with it. I'll take with the mental flexibility to be alert with the potential and personal power to take action. Let me add with the final thought with the power to apply with everything in this book. Reframing is a nearly effective tool with the pull out of the mental tool shed to produce greater results. To think of the broader sense of the ongoing profit, exploring assumptions, finding useful contexts as well after what we do well with leaders and all other great communication with the masters of art of reframing. They know how to motivate and empower the people to take anything that happens to make it into a model for the possibility. There's a famous story about Tom Watson, the founder of the IBM, one of the subordinates of the head, made a horrendous mistake with the head, cost him $10 million, and he's called into Watson's office and said, "I suppose you want me to resign?" Resignation. Watson looked at him and said, "Are you kidding? We spent $10 million in educating you." It's a valuable lesson. Everything as that happens with the best leader, one of the learns of the lesson, put the most empowering frame of the outside, invents the works for the politics, business, teaching, and your home life as well. Well, all the known people that will reverse reframe it, no matter how bright with the silver lining, you can also always find the darker cloud, but every discipline, enabling attitude for every counterproductive behavior, there is an effective reframe. You don't like something, change it. If you behave in a way that they don't support you, they don't do something else. If the way that there's a way to just not produce effective the behavior to make sure that there's available when you need them. When you learn how to retrigger any of the useful behavior at the moment, if the bull desire of the next chapter, we'll look at the ways of Chapter 17, Anchoring Yourself to Success.